Today we're going to talk about how to start a marriage green card case, which is by Form I-130, a petition for alien relative. In essence, a U.S. person, a U.S. citizen, or a green card holder is applying for their foreign spouse to be able to get a green card. Now, there's a lot more to this process, which is finishing it off with adjustment of status or consular processing. There may be waivers needed. All that's a discussion for another time. The sole focus of this video is the petition for alien relative, the I-130 process. We're going to talk about important parts of it that you need to be aware of and how that whole petition looks like, so you have a running start of a strategy on how to complete the marriage green card case for your spouse. Thanks again for joining us. We're going to have a good discussion today going over the I-130 petition, a petition for alien relative, or when you want to bring a foreign spouse to the United States. Now there's fiancé visas as well. That's another form I-129F. I'll do another video about that. But this is a case where an American person, either a U.S. citizen or green card holder, is married to a foreign person. And they want that foreign person to be able to obtain lawful permanent residency, or the green card as it's well known, in the United States, so they can live and work here, maybe eventually even get U.S. citizenship. So to start that process, you have to submit Form I-130 petition for alien relative. Now, if you're doing the case in the United States, you may or may not file Form I-485 application for adjustment of status if it's appropriate. Or if you're going to do it overseas, you got to do what's called consular processing through the Department of State. And this all comes down on a page in the form near the end of it where it asks where you want to apply for a green card. And if you know adjustment of status is appropriate for you, and there'll be a separate video on that, you mark the local field office where you're living or where the foreign person is living so they could do the interview there. If it's overseas, then it's going to be at the embassy that's appropriate for them, usually where they live at the time or where they're working at the time. That's usually where people go. Now, if you are applying for it in the United States and both the couples are here, both parts of the couples are here, then there usually is an in-person interview with both parties, both spouses, where they go in person to a local USCIS field office and do an interview to get to know them and see if they're really a couple or not, or if they're lying. But if the case is going through consular processing through the embassy overseas, they usually and almost always only interview the foreign partner, the foreign spouse, and talk with them about the relationship. And especially in those type of cases, the evidence of the relationship becomes really important because the officer interviewing you can't see the dynamics between the couple to just get a feeling, a gut feeling whether this is real or not. So having good documentation is key, and we're going to start talking about that documentation right now. So the Form I-130 petition, always go to USCIS.gov to download the newest version of the form because these change. Sometimes they'll change and they look exactly like the previous one, but it's still changed. And if you submit an expired version, they're going to deny the case or just send it back to you and say it was inappropriate. And so you don't really want to do that. So always go to USCIS.gov, find the I-130 petition page to find the latest version of the form, how much the current fees are, which do change, and also the filing location. If you're in the United States, both parties are living here, typically people file with the adjustment of status if it's appropriate, but it's sent to what's called a centralized location. It's called a lockbox that's appropriate based on what your residence and address is. You have no control where it goes, or after arriving at that lockbox, which is a sorting center, which service center is going to actually process the case, you have no control over that. And the problem is different service centers that are going to review the case have different timelines of how quickly they could do things. So when you ask about timelines, it varies drastically. And if there was an estimate, each case is different, so the timelines vary. If the spouse, both spouses are in the United States, eventually the case goes to a local field office where they do an interview, and a lot of the delays in how long the I-130 process is going to take depends on that local field office and how busy they are, how understaffed they are, and the like. But if the case is going to the embassy, the time it takes for the I-130 to be approved is based on that length of time that service center has to do it, and it varies drastically. I've had these approved in 3-4 months, and I've had them take over 1.5 years. Whether you're marrying a citizen or green card holder, it has an effect on it. They usually give priority to spouses of U.S. citizens, so that could be faster as well. But again, you submit the I-130 petition. Mailing addresses vary. If someone's overseas, it goes to one address based on where the petition is. But note that historically, if both spouses were living overseas, they would allow you many times to submit it directly to a USCIS office in that foreign jurisdiction or to the embassy to approve, but most of that is closed down. It's much more difficult to do that, to apply directly at the embassy, unless a unique circumstance exists or emergency situation exists, which sometimes you want to do because it's much faster to directly file the I-130 petition with the embassy or the USCIS sub office there, but it's harder and harder to do something like that. And if that was something that you're looking into as a possibility, you should consult with an immigration attorney. So, okay, now we're finally going to get to what's on that form. When you are going to submit a form I-130, it's important to note that always have a cover letter, initial page that breaks down as a checklist or an introduction or a table of contents, if you will, of what is included in there. And the initial thing is the form I-130, which is all the biographic information that's necessary. Then also an I-130A, which is more biographic information of the foreign spouse. And then you need proof that the U.S. person has status, either their green card or their U.S. passport or their naturalization certificate or their birth certificate, one of these kind of documents to show that a U.S. person has the right to give this immigration benefit to the foreign person. Next, you submit the marriage certificate, and that could get complicated depending on what part of the world you got married and what kind of documents they need, but essentially you need to show that they're in a valid marriage based on the jurisdiction where they got married that's recognized. And also, if they had previous marriages, you need to show that those previous marriages were ended, divorced, or death certificates if one spouse passed away, so that you are able to marry again. You can't be married to two people, and sometimes people think they're divorced, but they didn't finish the paperwork right, so a new marriage is not appropriate if they undo things. So problems like that do emerge frequently enough. So we went through I-130, I-138 forms. Those are USCIS. And then proof that a U.S. person is there and that they're lawfully married. That's that. The next thing, which is the bulk of the paperwork involved in a marriage green card case, an I-130 petition, is proof that your relationship is real. So there's lists and lists of this kind of stuff that you could go through to see what kind of are typical. We're going to go some larger ones here. I've already done a video that you can check out on the JQK Law YouTube page that talks about documentation needed for a marriage case, but I'll briefly describe it here again. So one of the main things we look at, especially if the couples are living together, is do they have a joint lease agreement, or are their names both on the house that they live in or the home that they live in. Now note, again, if they're living separately or one partner is overseas and one is here, it becomes a little more harder to get some of these documents. But the place where they live or living history, they may have had to live together before they separated, so one could be overseas for some reason, maybe they had work overseas, they have to leave. But residence. Another is financial documents. Do they have joint bank accounts, maybe here or overseas? Joint credit cards. Do they have assets together? Maybe they have car ownership together. Another is insurance documents. Do they have car insurance together? Do they have health insurance together? Do they have apartment insurance, the renter's insurance together? There's various kinds of other insurance that may exist. Life insurance beneficiaries, for example. All these documents are helpful in showing that relationship. And then, travel records. Did you fly together to various parts of the world? That shows an active relationship, not a relationship made for lies just to get a green card. And then there's family photos together with family members to friends, places you've been, maybe any affidavits from family members that attest to the relationship. There has to be a specific format for that because certain information has to be included. And then you kind of just look at your relationship. Maybe you have birthday cards written together, have dates on them to show the development of the relationship. You might have gone to Disneyland and bought season passes together, so you have season passes that look the same or are sequential in their numbers, so it shows you went to Disneyland together, or have photos at Disneyland as well. And there's all these kind of things. You just got to dig in deep, and that's something we do when we have a consultation to analyze people's relationship to see, well, what kind of coupley things can we show to show that's a real relationship. Now, some people might have children together, birth certificates showing both their names. It's a good and easy way to prove this is a real deal. We have kids together, and that responsibility that comes with it, we have it together. So these are the documents you put together. You print them all, ideally print in color, and just print as much as possible. So it's a big packet, organized and clean, that you could then mail to USCIS for it to be reviewed. Now, some notes I want to mention before going forward, while we're done with that portion, is that when you do submit an application to USCIS, if you have had previous findings of misrepresentation or fraud related to a previous marriage, that can be held against you. In some cases, you're not allowed to get a green card in general, not only just a marriage green card, if there's been accusation of marriage fraud and finding of that in the past. So be careful about those kind of situations that could deny you. Also, if the U.S. petitioner has had, unfortunately, any sexual abuse against a minor case against them that's been, convicted, that comes under the Adam Walsh Act, which could potentially prevent them from being able to petition for foreign spouse unless they obtain a waiver. So there's a lot of little nuanced parts you have to be aware of. And again, you got to look at the foreign person's background. We're not going to get too much into detail on this right now, but whether they could even get a green card is very important. So even before you file the I-130, if your relationship is real, you got to think, I could start the case, but is the case going to end? Does the foreign spouse have the ability to get a green card? Have they had criminal history? Have they had any immigration violations or fraud or misrepresentation to U.S. Immigration Service or other kind of stuff that could prevent it to make it not even worth filing in the first place? And there is another video in this series about inadmissibility. That's a term that they use to catch these kind of issues beforehand, and if needed, prepare for those or have a waiver ready. So that's a recap I wanted to provide of the I-130 petition. Once you dig deep into in the forms, you'll see there's a lot of questions about your background that you should get in order beforehand. 5 years of work history, 5 years of residential history, each of your parents' names, dates of birth, place of residence, place of birth, other immigration past history for the foreign spouse, different names used, different previous spouses, and a lot of this kind of information that they really want to collect. And so it's important to have that ready and fully put it there in a clear format so it's easy for the officer to view. There's simple stuff, for example, try to type it in instead of handwriting it. It's easier for them to read. Don't forget you have to submit passport photos, 2 of the petitioner, that's the U.S. person, and 2 of the beneficiary, that's the foreign person terminology that they use for that specific petition. The petitioner and the beneficiary. So the passport photos are key. And as always, don't forget to pay the filing fee. That's a mistake people make. And when you write out that check, make sure the amount's correct. Make sure the written version and the text version of that amount, the numerical version, are matching. And the check has to be made to the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, that full term. Don't make it less, and make sure the rest are good. Now, they do allow credit card payments as well. Just be mindful that the credit card goes through and there's not any issues with that. But that's a general and pretty complete recap of the whole situation. You should consult with an immigration attorney now that you know this information to get case-specific guidance that's appropriate for you, because each case is different, and this is just general information. And each couple have different relationships, different lives, different pasts, and different history. So it's really the appropriate thing to do is to talk with somebody or talk to a few people. There's another video that I break down how to choose the 8 steps of choosing an immigration lawyer. Check that out to get multiple opinions, multiple perspectives, because there are times when a person I've had come to consultation with me, and I'm the 5th lawyer that they've talked to, and I disagree with all 4 of those lawyers. What they say were wrong, and in those cases, I was still right. But it could be where everyone is wrong, but a few people may be right. So it's really important for you to talk to different people, get different perspectives, do your own study like you're doing by watching this video, and then put it all together and make a decision of who provides the best representation, who has the best relationship I'm comfortable with, and who I could trust with this important aspect of your life. And of my life, I guess, when you're talking about yourself. Thank you so much for watching this video. I appreciate it. Please continue watching the rest of the videos in this series to get a full balanced idea and perspective of the marriage green card process. I wish you all the best. Bye-bye.